Shattered Stitch here with Cat and Rabbit. We are giving you the tutorial for the wings that you have all been inbox bukakaing me for wanting ever since you putting my Maleficent on the internets. So we are tracing a pattern, very important.
And I think those Maleficent wings are halfway my fault.
They are. She's the brains.
I was like, hey, I need to make wings. Help. You know stuff about cosplay.
She's the genius behind the wings.
No,
over there.
You found the tutorial by what's...
disregarded in the corner. Say hi, Solo.
There's Cat. Over there. So, what I'm doing right now is... there's a piece of butcher paper on the floor. And we're making a set of gargoyle wings for Matt. For his Exodune LARP character, which is a gargoyle. And they're going to end up looking like this guy right here. Hopefully. Stop moving your hand. I'm tracing on that. So, on the other side of this paper is the pattern that we made his angel wings out of. And the reason I am tracing his body onto this thing is so that we can draw the wings proportional to his body. So they'll look good hanging off of him without him having to lay here the whole time, because ADD kids can't sit still very long.
Rough outline of the body that you're going to be working with here in light pencil. The bigger image there is going to be your pattern for your wing. You're going to try to work with whatever proportion it is for the cosplay that you're trying to build. If you need big, huge wings, little bitty fairy wings, whatever, disregard my ugly troll feet. You're going to draw those in, and then you are going to work on, if you so choose to build a frame, then building your wires and your frame. The head length, you can see the body. There's the shoulder all the way down to the hand right here, the outline of the hand. For this particular set of wings, he wanted to go a little bit further than the fingertips, just a little ways down. So they drew the pattern accordingly. As you can see up here in full view, they're actually pretty impressive. They're pretty big. They are about the same size as my Maleficent wings when they're folded. We had a little bit of extra stuff to do with that, and we had to make them so they would extend.
Now that we have our body traced out, head, shoulders, and we know where our harness is going to sit, which is right here, we decided to draw the top of our wing and formed our frame around it, like that. And we made two of them, because, well, you need two wings. This is 3/16 inch wire.
Your own harness and not use the prefab like I did, this is what you're going to have something sort of like. Tell us about what you made here.
This is a piece of Sintra that I put a towel on Matt's back to make sure it wouldn't burn him. And then I heated up the Sintra really, really hot with the heat gun. Then I formed it on his back to make it fit, because we are using these for LARP, which means if he gets hit, I didn't want it to cut into him. I didn't want it to chafe or hurt him or anybody else. So it's curved to fit and protect his spine and not hurt it. The problem with Sintra is that it's a little bit, if it cracks, it'll splinter. So I reinforced the edges that I thought might crack with, this is gaffer's tape, because it's what I had laying around. And this is the stuff that they put under bathtubs. You can get it at Home Depot. It's like PVC rubber or something like that. So I put that there to protect the screws so they wouldn't make the Sintra shatter. And those screws are holding in these two pieces of pipe, which have little rubber bits in them. We wanted to be able to, for him to put the harness on, put the costuming on over the harness, and then slide the wings in two small slits in the back of the costuming so the costuming wouldn't get messed up. So these actually have the little locking screws. So when you actually put the wire down in the tube, you tighten the screw down and they'll stay in place.
In the case you are a lazy asshole like I am and don't want to fool with all that harness making mess, as Solo showed you, this is clearly the superior product. you can buy a manufactured harness. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for the help. Mommy, no! This is a harness that's called the Beast Wing harness, and it's made by California Costumes. It is completely collapsible. You can see the hinge here on the back that will give you a little bit of mobility as far as it not, really being like wearing a plate on your back. It bends this way. It has a little bit of wiggle the opposite way. It's a pipe frame. It's all plastic. Here is your pulling mechanism for extending the wings. They are really, really huge once they're actually open. My only criticism of this frame is that these nylon cords are just not strong enough to hold up all the foam once I got it on there. As you can see, one of them is missing because I legit ripped it out of the harness trying to open the wings. In here, all I did was just leave the fabric that was already standard on the wings and then cut my wing layers. Once we did the pattern like Becca's working on over there for the other set, we did a pattern for Maleficent that was proportional to my body. Looked at the pictures and saw how many rows of feathers there were, cut the pattern out, and all I did was just use the spray adhesive that comes in, aerosol cans, sprayed it on there, and glued the layers down, starting at the very bottom with the longest layer. I did have some purple show through from the fabric, so I had to add, some extra layers here and there to camouflage that. You can't really tell in the photos. It all just kind of blends to black. And they're just laid down in layers just like any other scale or feather pattern. I didn't cover my edges because I'm a terrible person. But they do have a lot of mobility. I use these for the Maleficent cosplay that you've all seen pictures of. They have withstood my abuse pretty wonderfully. I LARPed in a combat LARP with them a couple of weekends ago. Took a hell of a beating. They survived that. They've got Mars and stuff on them that you really can't tell either up close or in photography. So they're really, really durable. They're really cheap to make. This wing frame, oops, sorry guys, is fully mobile. As you can see, it'll bend any which way. You just put it on like a backpack, and you can fold the feathers any way. Like I said, these are California Costumes wing frames. They run about $30 or so, depending on what sort of wings you want to start with. Some are smaller than others. Some of the fabric panels are smaller than others. So keep in mind how big you want when you get started, because if you're going to have to add a lot of foam, you're going to have to add some fabric to attach it to and all that kind of good stuff. So when you go to cut, you're going to need a layer for the front and a layer for the back just to give the fully feathered effect, since you are covering the core fabric of this to give all the layers. Like right here, they're kind of just free floating because I ran out of fabric, so they're just kind of hanging out all in no man's land. We extended way down past the base fabric. These actually do, as Maleficent said, drag the ground when I walk. They are very long. I think I stand about 5'3", and they are pretty overwhelming. I think they're about a 10 to 12 foot wingspan, fully extended. Becca, you suggested replacing the nylon cables with bicycle brake cable or something within the frame. Is that something you would encourage our viewers to do to strengthen that pulley system?
Yeah, if you're going to make wings this big with the California Costumes frame or any other frame that uses a nylon pulley, I would replace the nylon cord with bicycle cord and put... They sell little metal wheels like you use for a pulley at Home Depot or Lowe's, and run the bicycle cord through that to make it strong enough to lift the weight of these wings. Because even though it is foam and it's really lightweight, you're carrying a lot of it, and it's so spread out that you need the strength of the bicycle cable.
Now, if you don't need the full extent for effect or for costuming accuracy, it's really not an issue. They're very mobile, they're very organic as they are, but if you really want that extra wow factor and really want, a huge impressive wingspan, and you're going to add a lot of foam and stuff to them, you're going to have to strengthen those cords, because as I said, and you can tell in my pictures, without putting my hand right here under it and actually holding it out manually, you're just not going to get that full extension. In the stock photos of the Beast Wings themselves, you can see how big they're supposed to get, and with the added weight of the foam, the joints just can't take it. Not to mislead you guys and act like they're very heavy. They're actually not. They're very lightweight. I wore them for several days at the second Dawn game. They didn't bother me at all. I didn't realize I was wearing them. I ran over people with them because I forgot they were there. But if you're going to build on a prefab frame, you're definitely going to want to test the strength of the pulley system and reinforce that before you start messing with putting all this stuff on there. If I were going to use this again, which I'm not, I'll actually build a new pair. I would have to disassemble all of that and take it off and go down to the bare pipes and take all of that out. So you definitely want to think about things like that, which we didn't even consider it before we built these, but it's always a thing. And that's, a matter of fact, another reason why I'm going to build a second pair rather than repairing these, because it's just going to be a huge, ginormous pain in the ass, and ain't nobody got time for that. The proportion of his wings, he's standing in front of the mirror as Becca holds the pattern behind him for his approval. I said that they looked a little small, and then was reminded, of course, that these are for LARP purposes. So for something small, and especially for like a Dragon Con build, you're not going to want something with the same huge Cobra hood type spread as my Maleficent wings. You're going to want something small and compact, because even though these look really kind of narrow, as they're going to fit behind his back, they're going to look bigger than they actually are. And like I was saying, for mine, when they're folded, they're about this size. So unless you really just want that huge wingspan wow factor, you're going to want to go little like this.
Remember doors. You have to be able to walk through doors, or remember that you're going to have to turn sideways to get through them.
Or go through the Marriott if that's your bag. You're not going to want to do that with like a huge 10-foot fully extended wingspan. Finished pattern, you can see where we've boldly drawn the lines of all the layering. This is the same thing we were showing you with the layers of the feathers on Maleficent's wings, except these are vertical because these are for a gargoyle's wings. So you look at our source and you count the ribs and all the layers of feathers, and all you do is you draw that same effect onto your pattern. As you can see, Becca's over here cutting open the roll. This is foam underlayment. This is the exact same thing that my wings are built out of. As you can see, it comes in a variety of colors. This is, in fact, yellow. It comes in white. I think it comes in metallic colors. Crinkle, 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 crinkle. It comes in metallic colors if you want to get soundproofing foam. It's all about the same amount. It's going to range you from about 30 to 40 bucks a roll. I think this is, what, 100 square feet?
I got the white stuff from Lowe's. The stuff we made those wings out of was 20 bucks.
Yeah, it runs about 20 to 40 to 30 depending on where you're getting it from. Like this is going to have logos on it, so we're going to have to be a little creative with how we cut it. Some of it has.
If you're going to stay with this color, you have to be creative. We're going to be painting ours gray because it's for a gargoyle, so the logo doesn't actually matter here. If you're doing it my method, it's helpful to have it kind of translucent because you can see the pattern you need to cut out right there.
Right.
Just, draw it on, cut it out, and you're done.
As opposed to mine, which were a complete nightmare because it was all guesswork, tracing. So she's just rolling her pattern out and rolling the foam right over top of it. And like I was telling you guys when you were asking me to type out the instructions for it, it's almost idiot-proof. If I can do it, you can do it. So here we're just taking a marker and just drawing the pattern that you can see through the foam onto the foam. Now for something like this, what you see is what you get. But for something like Maleficent, when you're having to do layers, you need to make sure you overdraw your pattern to have enough wiggle room so you're not going to have to add patch layers in between the rows of feathers like I did. I went straight from the pattern and didn't compensate for the fact that I was actually cutting the two apart. If this were rows of feathers, obviously if this is the bottom row of the feathers, I'm going to need something to hang down to camouflage this row. But in this case, what you see is what you get. You're going to be pretty safe cutting on your line. If you're doing feathers where you're going to have to cut the loops out of the bottom to make the feathers themselves, you're going to want to cut a little bit outside of your pattern to save yourself from making the error that I made. If you remember the bat wing layer that I showed you on mine that were already in place on the pre-bought wings, we are actually fabricating that layer now to go on the homemade harness. We've got the pattern underneath and the fabric layer on top, or in the middle rather, and then the foam layer that we've cut out from the pattern on the top. So the fabric is going to serve really as an anchor layer. We're testing the wire.
You can't glue the foam to itself. It just, the hot glue doesn't stick. So you need a fabric layer to glue each of the outer layers of foam onto.
Out one layer, put that layer down and cut 2 layers. So even if you manage to mess up following your pattern the first time, at least your 2 fuck-ups will match.
Yep.
And as you can see, we are both confirmed cat ladies because we're using cat food cans to hold down the stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. Any weighted object will do. We just prefer cat food. We are gluing the fabric core layer to the wing frame just with a regular old hot glue gun. Source of all of our things. All you're just going to do is roll that fabric over your wing frame and glue, glue, glue.
Yeah, we cut the fabric a little bit wider than the pattern so that we have room to glue it in.
One wing. Be sure to lay your other one out and do a mirror image. We almost had a mess up here where we laid them both the same way to cover them both on the inside this way. And that would have been really bad because then they would have shown a seam and an edge that we wouldn't want shown. If you look really closely at my Maleficent wings, I'm an idiot and actually did make that mistake. So the foam looks funny on one of the wings where you can see some of the plastic coating. But always make sure you mirror image. So 1, you can make sure that all of your curves and folds are the same. And 2, so that you always make sure to have the right side facing out. With the fabric cores now in place. Everybody else together. Ooh. Ah. So flowy. We've cut out 2 wing panels here, and as we wanted to point out, we are now cutting out a second because as when we were working with a core in the middle that you're going to affix the foam to, you want to cut a front and a back layer of your feathers, scales, whatever, that's going to affix to the core layer. Something else you also want to note that with most rolls of this foam, let me see that picture there, you are going to have 2 sides, and it's going to be kind of hard to see here, but one side is going to be shiny and smooth. The other side is more matte and bumpy. You can really see the texture.
Porous foam.
Right here. Yeah, it's very porous foam. So you have a matte side that's more textured and bumpy, or you have this side that's a lot smoother, smaller grain, and way more shiny. So if that matters, if your foam color is the color that you want your wings or your scales, pay attention to the textured matte versus more flat and shiny side when you are cutting out your panels for the fronts and backs of your wings.
You need 2 that are facing this way and 2 that are facing that way. And then when you actually put them on the wings, you'll put both shiny sides out on each side.
Right, like a sandwich. Yeah. You want the toasted side on the outside.
Exactly.
And the not toasted side on the inside. So Kamui has a sandwich method. For Warbler, we have a sandwich method for foam wing building. Shiny side out on both sides or matte side out on both sides. Unless you want to do something crazy and mix it up a little bit, in which case you can totally fuck it up and then say it was intentional, like I did. Shh, don't tell nobody. But yeah, and you know, like she's just cutting out roughly around before she goes in and details it all out. That's something also, if you're doing something like my Maleficent wings where you're going to need tons and tons and tons of freaking layers, make sure you lay all of those layers out so that you know how much foam you still have to work with. Since these are one pretty much stationary piece, and we're just going to work with, for example, at the upper top, of the wing, we need to put in some feathers. So we're going to have to do a couple of feather layers to make it look like this on the front and like this on the back. So we're going to have to make sure that we have enough extra foam, which we still have, you know, like that much of a 100 square foot roll. To do that, always make sure you know that you're going to have enough material to do what you need, because you may have to do some creative like pattern jigsawing on your sheet to be able to accommodate your needs. Now we're tracing the feather layers onto multiple layers of foam. Anytime you do layers of feathers or scales or anything like that, you have to do them in rows, because just like on the wings of a bird, the scales on a snake or a lizard or anything like that, they're all in sort of, you know, biological patterns. They're in rows or layers and things like that. So from our master layer that's here on the bottom that we sketched out on our original pattern, we're just using some extra end pieces to trace out these rows of feathers that we're going to put over the more bat-wingy looking part. I use the exact same method for Maleficent with the rows of the feathers, except instead of a vertical row like we're doing here, like this is the top of the wing right here where my fingers are, like right here's the top joint. These are going to go down towards the bottom. They're going to be vertical rows in the case of these gargoyle wings, whereas for the Maleficent wings or any bird's wings, they are going to be horizontal. I'm going to cut horizontal line of feathers like for my Maleficent. We're going to assume that the top of this is my pattern piece that I've already cut out. Your feathers are going to have a line. They're either going to come this way and curve up, or the opposite way generally. A lot of times feathers are going to have little chips and deviations. They're going to have a vein. Maybe you're going to have some, you know, curvature like that to look like a feather. Whatever it is, make sure that you are sure that they're all going to go the same way or the other way or whatever per feather. They're not just going to go all willy-nilly poking different directions. So if you're up here, you're going to draw your feathers. These are terrible, I'm sorry in advance. And so we're going to go down here. I'm going to just start a random new row just to show you guys how we're going to layer these. Uno momento while I cut these out. Assuming that we have our wing frame at the edge of our fabric here, and that this is our core, either the one you've made with your pattern or the one that is already attached to the wing frame, like my California Costumes wing frame. You have your wee layers of feathers here. As you can see, I've cut the individual feathers so give them a little bit of, you know, they'll catch in the wind and they'll move individually and everything. You're going to start at the bottom of your layers. So for this, you're going to glue, you just take your glue of choice. You can either use a hot glue gun or my preferred method of using spray adhesive. You can get that in the craft section. It comes in big aerosol cans. It holds pretty good. In the case of spray adhesive, you're going to spray the back of this and then spray your fabric. Wait for it to get tacky a little bit, kind of like eyelash glue. Then you would stick it down, let it hold, and let it bond. This is where I messed up with Maleficent. In cutting my pattern, I cut them like this. When I cut them out, I didn't give any extra room, so then I had the gaps and had to fill them in with extra rows of feathers. What you should do is always give extra room so that when you have your layer, you just lay it on top. And then you just ad nauseum repeat, layer, 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 all the way up for however many layers you need to accommodate your pattern. And then that's what is going to give you your overlapping wings. And then you just do that until you're sick of it and you can't stand looking at it anymore, and then you should be somewhere around done. As we have unfortunately discovered in the case of wings like this, when you are doing vertical rows, you can't do them really in the same manner that you did Maleficent, where you can just cut a strip of them since they're going down. You have to cut individual feathers and lay them singly. So just a bit of advice. Becca, how tired are you of cutting individual feathers?
I'm about to cut you.
See, she's tired of cutting individual feathers.
But it's going to look badass when it's done.
Yeah, you see how that looks? So when you're going to make feathers and you're getting really ambitious about, how you're going to lay them and the choice of directions on the feathers, understand what you might be taking on. See how that's going to lay. Now keep in mind there's going to be another layer under here of the webbing, but those are going to lay over. They're going to be painted. They're going to look really cool. But if you do vertical layers of single feathers, you have to do them all individually. And given these are smaller wings and we don't need a lot of them, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you're planning to do an entire wing like that, you're going to hate your life. Box cutter. We're cutting off the edges to make our layer fit all nice and snug inside of our wharf, except where she's fucking it up right there, making it ugly. So see how that fits all nice and snug in there?
Well, except that foam doesn't glue down to foam.
So see the genius behind the madness here?
We'll actually have to trim this down a little bit more, but you can't add more, so you always cut it too big, trim down a little bit, see what you can do. We'll glue this one in first when it's the right size. Glue down the edges. Careful to let your hot glue cool a little bit because it will melt the foam and you can actually see it through the layers. It's really weird. So we'll glue this down in and then we'll take our next layer and it'll be trimmed down as well, of course. And put it in there.
So then that will actually cover your edges that we've, cut and everything. So you're not going to see our raggedy edges here. It'll be nice and covered.
The reason we're not gluing it now is because I have to go and paint these before we can put them on because this layer here is going to stick up and you might see underneath and it's not going to be yellow when we're done. So.
And what are we going to paint these with, Becca?
Plasti Dip. LARPers. LARP stuff. It's how we make weapons in LARP.
And remember, these are going to be for a gargoyle, so we're not going to go with the base yellow color. They're going to do a gray Plasti Dip over these individual feathers because, as she says, with the individuals, they are pretty flowy. They're going to flip up. You're going to see the bottom. So when we can get away with painting these pretty much as a sheet because you're not going to see the bottom and probably maybe even this bigger layer as well, with these, they're going to lift, and you're not going to want pretty gray painted front, crappy, shiny yellow back. So we're going to have to individually paint these feathers. So see, you don't want to do this. You don't want to do this way with the individual feathers. You want to
you want to look awesome.
You want to do the long, maleficent versions of feathers because you're not going to see any of that. You do my lazy way. See, I do things the lazy way. Becca does things the professional,
I did it the lazy way first, just saying.
Detail-oriented way. She also did that, and you can see these layers really nicely. These are the wings that she created that I learned with using the tutorial that I'm sure I've linked several of you when you've asked me through various means. This is the same exact wing frame style that we're using for the gargoyle wings. You can see the layers under here. There's the fabric core layer that she made. The long layer on the bottom. The second not so long layer. And see how all of her ends are very nice and overlap. I didn't do that with Maleficent because I'm an idiot. And they just flip up and then you roll it around your frame and you're done. And we've shown you a lot of ways to do this tonight and it's probably really overwhelming, so if you have any further questions, please hit me up on Facebook, like their page, Cat and Rabbit. I'll link to it. Anything you guys want to know, any specific questions you're going to have, if you find any of this overwhelming and you have additional questions, please reach out and help us. We are considering maybe making a few spare pair to sell at some conventions where we go, maybe, if you guys want some.
Yeah, and we'll make a follow-up video for how we finish these gargoyle wings as well.
So you guys tell us what you want, and next week we will start with our actual work in progress for Dragon Con to follow along with the days till Dragon Con. You can see in her workspace where she's got all of her stuff going up for Aria of Mass Effect. And there's their full, super sweet freaking roster.
Because look at this, baby.
Yeah, look at that. You guys are going to see us finish this. Are you excited? Because I'm freaking excited. Are you freaking excited, Becca? She's so excited.
Don't fuck with Aria.
She's so freaking excited. So, for Shattered Stitch Cosplay and Cat and Rabbit, make you some damn wings.